don't leave when they fall out of love. They stay just long enough to make you feel like you're the one losing something, when in truth, they've already walked away in silence. Welcome to Broken Truth, where love meets lies, and every story reveals the pain behind the smile. Some betrayals don't come with lies, they come with absence. When someone outgrows a relationship but doesn't have the courage to say it, they begin to distance themselves emotionally while keeping up the illusion of closeness. This emotional dishonesty isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the little silences, the lack of interest, the hollow I love yous that no longer feel rooted. People who outgrow love but don't confess it often do so to avoid confrontation, guilt, or responsibility, but in doing so, they betray the other person's trust, because staying while your heart has already left is still a form of betrayal. It's not always about cheating. Sometimes the deepest betrayals come from pretending to still care. They didn't notice. At first, that's how it always begins, not with the silence itself, but with the way it slips in unnoticed, like a shadow that slowly stretches over a room you used to call home. One day, he stopped reaching for her hand under the table. She told herself he was tired. Another day, she noticed he didn't ask if she'd eaten, a ritual he never used to miss. She blamed stress, deadlines, life, but love doesn't go silent all at once. It unravels in sighs that don't meet your ears, in eyes that flicker past you instead of into you, and routines that lose the warmth they once held. She tried to fill the gaps, cooked his favorite dinner on a Wednesday just because, left little notes on the fridge like she used to, asked him about his day, even when he barely answered. She kept showing up, thinking love was a room that needed dusting, not one that had already been emptied. He was still there, physically, laughing at shows, scrolling beside her, kissing her goodnight, but it wasn't the kind of kiss that said, "You matter." It was the kind that said, "I know I should." And there's a difference between affection and obligation. She didn't want to name it yet, because naming it would make it real, and she still believed in what they had. Or maybe she just believed in who he used to be. It's strange how betrayal isn't always about someone else. Sometimes it's about the way someone stops choosing you, little by little, but keeps wearing the mask of love, because it's easier than admitting they've changed. She noticed it most in the silences, the kind that settled between them like fog, not heavy, but disorienting. She'd say something vulnerable, and he'd nod without looking, not unkindly, but with the kind of disinterest that doesn't come from malice, just detachment. She began to feel like a ghost haunting a house they both used to live in. Her friends asked if things were okay. She said yes, because she didn't have a story to tell, no affair, no screaming match, just less eye contact, less laughter, less us. She replayed old memories, wondering where it changed, wondering if she did something wrong. Maybe she became too predictable, too soft, too available. Maybe he missed the chase, the version of her who didn't cry when he forgot anniversaries, who didn't need reassurance when he went quiet. But the truth was, he had outgrown the love, not because it was wrong, not because she lacked something, but because he changed and didn't know how to say it. So he stayed, and staying, he left her slowly. There was a night she broke down beside him, whispered, "Do you still love me?" He hesitated. That was her answer. But instead of leaving, he pulled her close, whispered, "Of course I do." And in that moment, she realized love isn't always a lie. Sometimes it's just expired. He wasn't cruel. He didn't cheat. He didn't scream. He just stopped showing up with his heart. And when you're left holding a connection that only lives in your hands, it begins to burn. She started waking up before him and staring at the ceiling. Not crying, just adjusting to the quiet, to the loneliness beside someone who still shares your bed. It's a peculiar kind of pain, the one that doesn't have a villain. Only a slow fade. They still went on dates, still smiled in pictures, still kissed in public, But she stopped feeling known, stopped feeling felt. She tried one last time, planned a weekend away, a small town, just the two of them. Like old times, he agreed, smiled, said, "Sounds good." But during the trip, he was elsewhere, checking emails, sleeping early. She sat beside him on a balcony, watching the stars alone, even though he was 5 feet away. That night, she realized he wasn't staying for her, he was staying for comfort, for the version of them that made sense on paper, for the rhythm of routine. And that's when the betrayal settled in, not as a knife, but as a truth too soft to scream. He had already left her emotionally, but stayed physically just long enough to make her question her worth. When they returned home, she stopped trying, not out of anger, but out of clarity. She still made dinner, still laughed at his jokes, but something inside her went quiet. She didn't say much the day she left, just packed her things and wrote a note. "You stayed long after your love left. I stayed long after I felt alone. But I think we both know staying out of guilt is not the same as love, and I deserve more than your silence." He didn't call right away. Maybe he didn't know what to say, or maybe, in truth, he was relieved someone ended it. And that hurt too. But the silence that followed was cleaner. Not like the one she lived with. That one was sharp. This one was empty, but honest. She sat in her new apartment 2 weeks later, watching the rain slide down the window. She still reached for her phone out of habit, still thought about the old jokes, still wondered if he missed her, but slowly she began to realize she missed who he used to be, who they used to be, and sometimes mourning a relationship means accepting that people grow in different directions, and not everyone has the courage to say goodbye when the path splits. And sometimes the real heartbreak is realizing you weren't left because you were too much, but because they didn't know how to carry something that deep anymore. And they didn't say it because that would make them the villain. So instead, they stayed, and in staying, they betrayed. She didn't wake up with fire in her chest, or a sudden urge to cut her hair or run a marathon. Healing didn't arrive. With a bang, it crept in slowly. Like the first morning where she didn't check her phone, hoping to see his name. Like the quiet walk she took to the corner cafe and realized she wasn't trying to escape the silence anymore. The first few days after she left were still heavy. Memories didn't vanish, they echoed, in the scent of his shampoo still clinging to her sweater, in the playlist that shuffled their song at the worst possible moment, in the way she'd catch herself halfway through texting him about something small, only to pause and remember he wasn't hers to share things with anymore. But slowly, clarity settled where confusion used to live. She stopped asking, "What could I have done differently?" and started asking, "Why did I stay so long in something that made me feel invisible?" And that question changed everything, because for the first time, she wasn't focused on getting them back. She was focused on getting herself back. She started doing little things she'd put off, not as distractions, but as reclamations. Bought that book she kept postponing, sat in a cafe with no one to impress and no role to perform. She started noticing sunsets again, noticing how good tea tastes when you're not waiting for someone to text you back. Some nights still felt heavy. Healing doesn't mean the ache disappears. It just means you no longer handed a seat at your table. She learned to sit with herself, to ask, "What do I need today?" And actually listen. Some days the answer was rest. Some days it was reaching out to a friend, not with a broken heart to dissect, but just to laugh and feel human again. She stopped stalking his social media, not out of pride, but because she realized knowing what he was doing no longer served her healing. She didn't need to decode his silence anymore, because the truth had already arrived. He left when he stopped loving. He just didn't tell her, and pretending that wasn't betrayal wouldn't make it hurt less. So instead of pretending, she accepted, and from acceptance, she built boundaries, not walls. Boundaries, not to keep love out, but to protect her. peace. Next time someone grows distant, she promised herself she'd notice. Next time the connection feels one-sided, she won't romanticize patience. Next time someone stays without presence, she'd choose to leave with her dignity. She learned that love doesn't always last, but truth should. That staying in a relationship out of fear of hurting someone is not kindness. It's cowardice wrapped in delay. And she deserved more, so she created a space for that kind of love. A space where honesty was welcome, even when it was uncomfortable. Where presence mattered more than pretty words. Where someone showing up meant more than someone staying out of guilt. She didn't become bitter. She became clear, and in that clarity, she built a life that wasn't waiting for someone to complete it. She still believed in love, just not the kind that requires her to abandon herself. So now, when she meets someone new, she doesn't just listen to what they say, she listens to how they show up. She listens to how seen she feels. She listens to her own heart, and whether it's growing or shrinking in their presence. Because healing isn't about making them regret leaving. It's about learning to never betray yourself again, trying to make someone stay. And now, she finally knows she was never too much. She was just too real for someone who wasn't ready to meet her there, and that's not her failure. That's her freedom. Some people leave you while still holding your hand, and sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is let go of the one who already let go inside their heart. If you felt this silent betrayal, know this: it was never your fault. Subscribe for more truth beneath the silence. This is Broken Truth.